Hello, I'm Super Orange Cat. Here I'm now covering Toonami's top 5 worst moments of the year of 2020. 2020 was a good year, said no one. Now, basically, I literally compiled a giant list of things I thought were bad that happened this year for Toonami, and I deliberated amongst myself about which I should include in which order. And after putting some time, putting some thought into it, I came up with my personal list. So without further ado, let's go on to number 5. Number 5 is block shortening. If you recall, at the very start of this year, way back in January, we had a pretty stacked block. Like you had premieres of shows like My Hero Academia, Fire Force Season 1, One Punch Man Season 2, which quickly early in the year got replaced by War of the Underworld Part 1. We had Food Wars airing episodes. We had Black Clover airing debuts. We had Demon Slayer still owing debuts. It was completely stacked. He also had shows like Attack on Titan and The Promised Neverland airing reruns at the end of the block. That's pretty stacked, and was considered at least to many people, amongst the best lineups ever in the block's history. Well, you can't really say it's exactly Toonami's fault that there weren't as many dubs this year, and what dubs were being produced pretty slowly. So, throughout the year, we went from having a 5.5 hour block to where we are right now with a 3.5 hour block. Note at one period it was down to 3 hours, as shown by this schedule here. I just pulled from one of the times where it was only 3 hours long. And really, this is something I can't really say too much about because, like, we all know the reason why we didn't have as many shows, and there were increasing rumors about Toonami maybe not having the funds, and then what funds were Toonami did have are being thrown into these original shows. More on them later. So yeah, not much you can really say other than it sucks. Toonami is just shorter now. Now going on to the number 4 worst thing in Toonami in 2020, and that was losing Black Clover and Food Wars. These were two shows, and it's interesting, like the trajectory of these shows. Like for example, Food Wars. When it was first announced, a lot of people were really skeptical. Although it's in many ways it is a shonen, it didn't necessarily fit into the quote unquote Toonami brand. It had ecchi. It had ecchi, which is something that historically Toonami had shied away from. Right off the top of my head, the only time Toonami really aired a show with any appreciable degree of ecchi was Tenshi Muyo, at least off the top of my head. There could be something else someone's going to point out and be like, oh, remember this? And Black Clover. Black Clover might have the trajectory of the opinion of Black Clover might be one of the best, most interesting stories of anime this past half decade. Like when Black Clover first came out as an anime, and especially when it first came out of Toonami, I think it came out with more negative than positive reception. The most common refrain being people saying that it's basically in many ways a Naruto ripoff, but nowadays, people like slowly but surely come around to it, and a lot of people really love it. And it got to the point where Black Clover actually kind of did pretty well in the ratings. Food Wars too. Food Wars was a surprise hit in the ratings. It hit point 2 a lot. It built on the show in front of it a lot. But Food Wars, after the second play, it was announced that Toonami is still in negotiations to get more of it. And with a certain event, which I'm going to cover a little later, I don't think that's likely. However, we haven't had confirmation about that, so I'm not saying for certain it's gone. All I'm saying is I would not expect it anytime soon. Black Clover is an interesting case because it's because of the fact that dubbing has been slow on it. Tanami's been playing pretty close to where Funimation is with dubbing. And there's many rumors that Toonami wants to build time so they don't have to pull it off the block on and off from whenever Funimation has new episodes. But again, and a lot of people with these two shows removed mid-run are reminded of Boruto. Boruto is a show that kind of had a skeptical eye on it when it was first aired, but it had great ratings. It on occasion got to a point 3 in the ratings. However, it left the block, and it's no surprise it is because Viz Media bumped up the price, and Toonami wasn't willing to pay for it. So, long story short, I would never expect Boruto to ever be back on Toonami, unfortunately, and it's one of the long lost mysteries of the block. Now, going on to number 3. The number 3 worst thing to happen to Toonami in 2020 was Jimmo Seto Deathbeats. Now, I have gone on the record in saying that this show was a worse decision to bring on the block than Genlock. If you are a fan of me, if you've paid attention to me for a long time, you know that last year when I did this list, by a wide margin, my number one selection for the worst thing to happen to Toonami in 2019 was Genlock. So, just for a frame of reference, something I said was far worse than the worst thing in 2019 is only the third worst thing in 2020. That's just how bad this year has been to Toonami right there in a nutshell. And let me just give you some of the reasons why it was a bad decision. It's an Adult Swim show. The first season, which the picture I'm showing here, because I had a picture of Deathbeats, but I couldn't find it, so I'm just gonna show a picture of Machu Picchu here. Just know that this is that's season one. This was season two, and that's technically a different show. Full-fledged Adult Swim show. It really did not blend in with the block at all. People talk about it makes anime references. It's a, I hate this phrase, a love letter to anime, but a lot of people didn't like it either. It had poor ratings. The latest week it aired, it didn't even get to a point one, which is just absolutely tragic. That's an ugly rating for a rerun, by the way. And we have that for what's technically a premiere. The last four episodes are going to air off the block on Sunday night. And I have not seen a more viscerally negative response of any show on the block ever. And I'm talking about Pop Team Epic, which had had a kind of an explosive response when it first came out to a lot of people, and Genlock, which I mentioned before. And I'm also including another show, which I'm going to mention in a moment too, which kind of had a negative reception, but more on that later. Again, Genocide of Death Beats, the worst pickup Toonami had in 2020, and is the third worst thing to happen on Toonami in this year. Now, number two. Number two is a bit of an omnibus because there are several things that kind of fit under one general category, and I wanted to fit it under, kind of just want to talk about it all at the same time. Number two is corporate synergy, as I call it. If you've been paying attention to Toonami or Adult Swim in general the last couple weeks, you'll notice that they are shilling hard for HBO Max. We have marathons on Adult Swim, and they have this HBO Max logo in the corner. Same thing with Toonami. You had it with Primal when it aired back a week or two ago for Thanksgiving. And it's, like I said, a general Adult Swim issue. And also, like I mentioned, you had the Primal Marathon, which was basically a shilling event for HBO Max. And also, upcoming this next Saturday, you have the Wonder Woman movie and the Justice League movie airing, basically to promote Wonder Woman 1984, a new movie which is debuting on HBO Max. So, and it's this whole corporate thing, and it just screams desperation. And it's also another thing, kind of like the block shortening, you can't entirely pin down on Toonami because this is a top down thing. You had Warner Media, probably what happens, Warner Media beat down their door and was like, you're airing this. You're promoting Wonder Woman 1984. If you got a Wonder Woman movie somewhere in your coffers, you're airing it. You're airing it, basically. And Toonami probably had no say in this. And another big thing of corporate synergy to fit in is another very, very recent event, and that is the acquisition of Crunchyroll by Sony. AT&T, Warner Media, they're hemorrhaging money right now. They need to get some quick cash, and they sold off Crunchyroll to around $1.2 billion to Sony. And if you can take into consideration Funimation, that Sony acquired Funimation for like 140 million a few years ago, you'll think, well, Crunchyroll is not worth that much. True, it's worth its weight in gold to Sony though, because now Sony can more or less quote corner the American anime market, which should be a scary thing to people, which will lead to people going to High Dive, because that's the only other remote legal streaming service I can think of that's not owned by Sony in the United States right now. And there's always the concept of sailing the high seas, which will boom in the next few years, by the way. That's going to be another big story. Stay tuned for that in the anime industry in 2021. A lot of sailing the high seas. And it's going to be mostly because of this decision. And again, and from a Toonami perspective, this handicaps show selection. It played a role in something I'm going to mention in a moment about shows that Toonami will never get, you know, and also the fact that even Jason DeMarco went out and admitted that, yeah, Peanut Pirate Princess, Shenmue, and Blade Runner, they're going to be fine. The shows are going to happen, but the rollout might be a little bit in the mire, might be a little questionable, and I would not be surprised if that's code for expect something of a delay. And again, that's just another ugly thing that happened this year. Now, I'm just going to follow tradition. And right before I go to number one, I'm going to quickly go over some quote unquote honorable, or I guess I have to say dishonorable mentions about some of the ideas I pitched around in my head, but I didn't think was bad enough to include on this list for various reasons. First things first, I'm going to mention that Toonami's foray into politics with their support of the Black Lives Matter movement. It's not going to be on this list. It is not going to be on the best of list. I just want to leave it only at that. All right. And also another one, Ballmasters 9009. I decided against including this in the bottom five. I didn't like the show. I thought it was a weird decision, but there are quite a few people who actually ended up liking the show. So I couldn't say it's one of the five worst things to happen to this block this year. Another one, Paranoia Agent. I was surprised about how much I ended up hating this show. Like, it's not really a bad show, but so many people hype this up as like the next coming of Jesus, and I didn't really come to like the first few episodes were decent, but it falls under the category of show that sticks its head right up its own ass. If you know what that means, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Basically. Another one, JoJo leaving the block for a couple months, and this is kind of go to the whole situation with Black Clover, how Black Clover had issues dubbing. JoJo had that, but with Viz Media. However, the reason why it's got left off the five worst things is JoJo did come back. It got put in a great slot too. Another one. We got confirmation this year that Mob Psycho Season 2 and Konosuba, which is another show which has been commonly asked to be on the block by a lot of people, isn't coming. Basically, Jason and Marco went out and said that at Adult Swim Con, basically saying that, yeah, some shows we really wanted to get, we tried to get, but we couldn't get. So if there's a show that you really wanted, but we hadn't gotten, it's probably because we tried and for some various reasons we couldn't. And unfortunately, he did, by name, mention these two shows were in that category. And one more thing was the general poor Adult Swim Con Expo showings. I thought that was a broad topic, but I thought I could narrow it down because number one worst thing to happen in Toonami in 2020 was the delays for particularly two of the Toonami originals, most notably Uzumaki, which at the beginning this year was supposed to happen in 2020. We are in December 2020 and we have new Uzumaki, so you know what that means. So it got pushed back to another year, got pushed back to 2021. Actually, it was Adult Swim Expo where they showed the same teaser trailer we got like a whole year earlier, and then they were like, coming in 2021. And no one ate it up. Everyone was like, okay. And then you had like also like this little short of like one of the directors, producers in Japan of it, straight up admitting, yeah, the animation is harder than we thought it would be. So it's yeah, we're working hard on it. We're working our best, but it's not as easy as we thought it would be. Basically all but saying, yeah, it's gonna take a little while. Yeah. And another one too, Blade Runner. Blade Runner, we didn't have a year. I think we might have early in the year we're told that it was 2021 already. However, since then all we've gotten is literally just like two different stills. And it looks like it's gonna be, or at least incorporate a degree of CGI animation to it. And you know what people say, especially with anime fans are generally not a fan of CGI. You know, anime very traditional, very 2D usually, and a lot of people are very averse to that, and that was received pretty poorly. And also another concept about these I have mentioned for a while now is the more you talk about something, the more expectations build in the fan's mind. You see these with video game releases, and a very poignant, very recent one would be like Cyberpunk 2077. Like 2 weeks ago, people were talking about it like it's the next coming of Christ. Now you see all these people come out with these various complaints, which are typically the same complaints you get with new game release. Like it's buggy. It's like, yeah, no, duh. That's what patches are for, you know. It's buggy. It's not perfect. It doesn't fit my expectations, and that's a whole nother mire. But again, and the more you talk about it, and yet Cyberpunk 2077 was hyped up and talked about for years building up to now. And Uzumaki, it's going to be at least probably 2 years from its first announcement to when it actually airs. And we to a degree saw this problem with the Fully Cooley sequels, where in 2016 they're like, we're getting a new Fully Cooley, and everyone kept building and building and building their minds. The more Toonami started talking about it, the more people really hyped this up, and a lot of people were just disappointed by it. I mean, and even Fully Cooley Alternative was actually kind of good, but a lot of people are disappointed because they expected it to be like Fully Cooley. I mean, Fully Cooley is lightning in a bottle. You're not going to catch it twice. Best case scenario was that you would get a slightly inferior product. and a lot of people are just really disappointed. And again, and in my opinion, because of that, and not because of just disappointment that things are supposed to happen this year didn't happen this year, but the fact that I could see this being a barreling disaster for Toonami in a way if this is not handled right, could lead. That's part of the reason why I decided it was the absolute worst thing to happen to Toonami this year. What do you guys think? What are the worst things in your opinion to happen to Toonami this year? Leave your ideas down below. I know it's gonna be a fun comment section. I love reading them. If you like this content, if you want more Toonami listicle content like this, please like, please comment, and subscribe. I am Super Orange Cat, and that is all.